Does the mana value of your commander actually matter? Yeah, obviously it does, but not for the reason that you might be thinking. In Magic, every removal spell is a trade. You're trading one card to deal with another card, and most of the time, that's just fine, right? But every once in a while, you look at the board and go, yeah, I could remove that, but why would I bother? And that's not you dismissing a problem or an act of poor threat assessment. Some commanders just aren't worth the card that they're printed on. Maybe it's dirt cheap to recast. Maybe it's got some annoying protection built in. Maybe it's just not doing enough for the deck to be worth answering. It doesn't matter which one. The result is the same, that your commander is sitting there, completely removable, and somehow nobody's touching it. I call that functional hexproof. When you goldfish a new commander deck, most people don't take into account how high impact their commander is, and thus how likely it is going to be a threat for removal. Many decks look good in theory, but being reliant on a remove on site commander is a recipe for disaster in practice. When your commander is cheap, isn't worth removing, or playing a supporting role in the deck, your commander is perceived as less of a threat and thus allowed to stay on the board longer, which means you have more time to do the thing that your deck came out to do. Your commander doesn't have Hexproof written on the card, but rather one of a couple attributes that disincentivizes your opponents from spending a removal spell on it. Think of this as the opposite of a boogeyman commander that effectively has a remove me sign over their head. These attributes make your commander invisible instead of standing out as the most threatening thing on the board. Your commander has functional hexproof if it has one of these three particular attributes. Your commander has a low mana value, your commander has innate protection or resilience, or your commander isn't providing long-term value. While commanders with these attributes are very much targetable, there is an unseen cost to removing these kinds of commanders that go outside of the normal rules of Magic. There is a disincentive to removing these kinds of commanders that feels like you're not getting what you want out of the exchange. Before we get into all that, my day job is as a personal trainer and a fitness coach. I love fitness about as much as I love Magic the Gathering, and I'm always looking for ways to blend my passions together if I can. If you've been putting off going to the gym or building a workout routine, I want to let you know that it's the best thing that I've ever done, giving me more confidence and making me a better Magic player by making me someone who's more enjoyable to play with. In the description below, I have a free beginner strength and fat loss guide if you've been looking for some help getting started. So with that out of the way, let's look at your commander's mana value. What makes a low mana value commander so powerful in this context? Oftentimes, low mana value commanders are just hard to justify removing. According to EDHREC, at 65%, nearly 2/3 of the top 100 commanders cost 4 mana or more, and that number lowers to 18%, or nearly a fifth of the top 100 commanders, at 6 mana value and beyond. This matters because removal hitting a 2 mana value commander isn't the same as removal hitting a 4 or especially a 6 mana value commander. We often think of removal in the context of how many cards am I using to get rid of X cards on my opponent's board. A removal spell is often 1-to-1, where you use one piece of cardboard to remove another piece of cardboard. This might look simple on the surface, but a 1-for-1 removal isn't as 1-for-1 as it seems. Insert your favorite 4 mana value commander here. You ramp them onto the board and bam, they take a swords. In this 1v1 exchange, your opponent has came out in a more advantageous position as he only used 1 mana to get rid of your 4 mana commander, netting your opponent a 3 mana advantage on the exchange. This exchange is what makes efficient removal so strong and why there is such an importance on higher mana value cards being able to impact the board as soon as they land. While the ceiling is often lower on low mana value commanders, the exchange on efficient removal makes your opponents think twice before targeting your 2 mana value commander. Think of the value that one could get if your opponent saved that mana for a, Blightsteel Colossus on the other side of the table. That's an 11 mana advantage, and that's a hell of a lot more than the 1 mana advantage they would get from you. But thinking removal will never come your way is setting yourself up for disappointment. At some point, even a 2 mana value commander can become threatening. But because the cost to recast your commander is so much lower, it's much cheaper to forgive when it does happen. If your commander has a low converted mana cost, either 1 or 2, recasting your commander feels a lot less bad than having to recast a 4 mana commander for 6, or God forbid a 6 mana commander for 8, the first time that it gets hit with removal. Your opponent also knows this. Sending low mana value commanders back to the command zone is hardly a cost compared to a higher mana value commander. I mentioned earlier that it's particularly relevant here that removing these commanders feels like you are not getting what you want out of the exchange. These benefits don't seem like they would have that much of an impact on whether your commander gets moved or not in an actual game. But when we're being subjected to every other element of a commander game, at the same time, opponents with their value engines, giant creatures, and win cons, your commander basically becomes invisible. That's functional hexproof. The Fog of War easily covers the incremental value you gain, and this virtual advantage is what slowly lets you build an insurmountable value to win the game. But options for impactful low mana value commanders can be limited. We have to find other ways to eke out this advantage, and here I present some commanders that have some built-in resilience to them. There's an obvious impact that commanders offer with innate protection, whether it be indestructible, ward, or hexproof proper. Indestructible has been put down quite a bit here recently due to the increases of exile removal in our format, but there are still plenty of recently pushed removal spells that opt to destroy rather than exile. Indestructible, sure, isn't what it used to be. But you would be surprised how much of an impact it can provide. Some other commander options that are surprisingly sticky are backgrounds. Commander Legends Battle for Baldur's Gate that came out 5 years ago. That still feels like last year, but okay. Backgrounds are a subtype of enchantment that can be partnered with certain legendary commanders in the command zone. This mechanic gave us limitless possibilities of combinations and colors for certain archetypes that I find myself coming back to frequently. The background mechanic essentially allows us to separate the cost of our commander into 2 individual cards. What separates this from partner, another notorious mechanic, that allows 2 commanders to home your deck, is that your background is an enchantment. This may not seem like a lot, but enchantments are some of the most stickiest permanent types in the game, and in my experience, don't get removed hardly at all. This also in turn makes our commander with Choose a Background often have lower mana cost, which fits nicely into our first point. But what about commanders that say they have a certain mana cost, but in reality are lying straight to our face? Some commanders may have their cost reduced by completing certain actions. Most of the time, this is for their generic cost, which means this is also reducing commander tax as a result. This is powerful because, as the game approaches its conclusion, you should be incrementally gaining more and more of these pieces to make your commander cheaper, whether they be artifacts on the battlefield or cards in your graveyard. What about commanders that circumvent commander tax entirely? Gavin Verhey has gone on record stating how Yuriko the Tiger Shadow was a design mistake as her commander ninjutsu ability circumnavigates any commander tax that she might accrue during the course of a game. While not as uninteractable as Yuriko, we have a couple of commanders that do a good impression of this while still remaining incredibly fair. We have the Gods from Amonkhet that, when destroyed, will go back to your hand, ready to be cast for their original mana cost. Having to pay full mana for each cast is much more of a cost than 2 mana, and exile removal will send these guys back to the command zone, requiring that extra tax to be paid to bring them back. Liesa, Shroud of Dusk, also fits in this category, as instead of paying additional mana to recast her from the zone, you are paying an ever-increasing amount of life, which, if Phyrexian Manus has taught us anything, it's a cost that we're willing to pay. When choosing a permanent to remove, your opponents are looking to get their mana's worth out of the removal spell, and removing a commander that's only going to come back for the same cost isn't as much bang for your buck. Functional hexproof. This slight de-incentivization to remove your commander may be all it takes to send that piece of removal in your opponent's hand at another problem permanent. But what about commanders that have a job? I'm not talking about plumbing or accounting, but a job outside of sitting on the battlefield accumulating value, and when it's gone, doesn't need to come back for the deck to function. Decks that are built with this intention of having the commander out for the whole game are asking to have a bad time. Good deck building is building a deck that doesn't need its commander to function, but when out, will complement the gameplay of the deck. One way you see this in practice is the quickly growing in popularity 2-4-7 style of deck build. This style of deck uses a 2 mana value commander to ramp into a 3 mana ramp spell to catapult itself into the mid to late game faster than any other deck in the pod. Once the deck has achieved this incredibly early mid to late game mana, you are able to cast Haymaker after Haymaker without any care in the world of what your commander is doing. Your commander has done its job and, truthfully, is no longer needed for the deck to function. You already have all the mana that you could want, which turns your commander invisible as it's just another one of your already abundant mana sources. This is followed by the fact that everything you cast has much more of an impact than your commander for the rest of the game. We talked about decks that use their commander as an accelerant, but what about as insurance? Linvala, Shield of Seagate, is removal and board wipe insurance in the command zone that is also pretty inconsequential to the main plan of your deck. Whether it be second draw or flash typal, Linvala supports your deck aside from generating value, which puts much less of a target on not only Linvala, but because of her, anything on your board. Want a reliable board wipe in the command zone? Run Massacre Girl. How about finding a tool that's right for the job? Kellen's got your back. Commanders where you have already gotten the value out of them, or ones that play more of a sorting rule in your deck, have this extra layer of invisibility, or functional hexproof, when comparing them to the commanders that draw all the cards, create the insane board state, or outright win the game. So as you can see, all of this points to the same thing. Running a commander that lays low, either in mana cost or impact on the board, can save you a lot of hardship and cause a lot of headache for your opponents when trying to figure out the best value target for their removal. You can implement the lessons in your next commander deck by choosing a commander with one of these attributes, or maybe by swapping out a current commander of a deck with a remove on site commander to something that has a little bit more staying power. The commander you choose to run in the command zone isn't just consistency, but a threat assessment tool your opponents are always having to think about whether they realize it or not. A cheap, resilient, or supportive commander is a bad removal target, which means it survives longer. It survives longer, which means your deck's actual game plan gets more reps in. And even on the rare turn that it does get answered, the cost to replay it, or even the decision to not replay it at all, makes it well worth the piece of removal your opponents used on it. Every one of these attributes that I discussed in this video are doing the exact same job. The act of giving your creatures functional hexproof is de-incentivizing your opponents from removing threats and sending the removal towards your opponent's threats. The best removal is the removal you don't have to play. What's your favorite commander that flies under the radar and should probably get removed a lot more than it does? Let me know down in the comments, and while you're over there, give the video a like, and if you want to keep up with what I'm doing, hit the subscribe button. Again, my free beginner strength and fat loss guide is in the description below, or I guess you could really just do a push-up for every time I said commander in this video, right? Alright, thanks for watching. I'll see you later.